Hi Nick, thanks for taking the time out today to participate in the Publica CTV Explainer Series. Before we kick off and get into the nitty gritty, can you just briefly introduce yourself and where you work?
Absolutely. Thanks, Paul, and thank you very much for having me. So my name is Nik Dewar, and I'm the European Sales Director for Samsung Ads.
Excellent. So where do you see the market at the moment, Nick? There's a lot of excitement around CTV. There's lots being written on a daily basis. Can you just maybe provide some sound bites as to where you see the market evolving in 2021 and some of the trends that you guys are seeing play out at Samsung?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a fascinating space to be at the moment, and you only have to read any of the blogs or trade press at the moment to read and see that CTV is kind of like a hot topic, if you like. And really, it's a trend that started to emerge back in 2018, 2019, if not before, but was really accelerated last year during the pandemic in 2020, not just across Europe, but clearly globally, as people were spending more times in their living rooms. And so what's really interesting is that if you take a step back, it's the proliferation of the internet has really evolved what the TV is all about. We think about it as the TV still remains the digital fireplace of the living room where families and friends and households come to congregate, as I'm sure many of the listeners would have experienced during the recent Euros, although we won't talk about that. The challenge, however, is how brands can get cut through and evolve as this fragmentation across the TV starts to occur, especially with non-commercial platforms. And I think there's been kind of three key trends that certainly we're seeing. The first is that throughout last year there was a huge growth in smart TVs. As people were spending a lot more time at home, they were either looking at the current TVs and realizing actually we should probably upgrade it. And so we saw certainly a big spike from ourselves. I'm sure other manufacturers did throughout the whole of last year. And I think it's the latest Ofcom stats state that around 2/3 of UK households now have an internet connected TV, which is incredible. And as people are updating and upgrading their TVs, which tends to be on a 5 to 7 year cycle, we don't actually sell a non-connected TV anymore. So this is only going to increase. So certainly the scale of connected TVs is increasing. And at Samsung, we're lucky to be the world's largest television manufacturer, which is a position that we've held for the past 15 years. And some people don't know this, but we actually created the world's first smart TV back in 2008. So we kind of know a thing or two about consumers and their viewing habits and what they're looking for. So that's the first trend. The second is around what they're watching on their TVs, and I think there's a lot being publicised with regards to the impact that streaming's had. What I would say is that linear still remains the best way to build a brand. There's nothing really that comes close to it. However, streaming is most definitely on the rise. And there's enough stats and insights out there at the moment that you can read online about the impact that streaming's had on linear. And our own first party data kind of backs that up. And that, certainly throughout the whole of last year in the UK, streaming increased by around 61%. Versus linear, which still increased last year, but increased by 34%. So clearly you could see that there's a trend that already started to occur last year, and that's continuing. And then the third trend is really around the data. Internet connected TVs have now given us access to this really rich first party data. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means that there's more advanced targeting and measurement solutions for advertisers, which is really important. So, post lockdown and pandemic, as we're starting to come out of now, how these trends will evolve and viewing behaviours evolve will be really interesting. But certainly that's the point that we're at right now.
Okay, fantastic. And from a Samsung Ads perspective, what's unique about you guys? How do you differentiate yourself in the market? As you said, there's lots of companies at the moment purporting to have CTV capabilities, CTV inventory. As you said, there's a lot being written in the trade press. I mean, where do you guys kind of fit into the ecosystem?
Yeah, it's a great question. So Samsung Ads is the advertising division for Samsung, the world's largest TV manufacturer. And our goal really is to try to help brands to find their desired audiences. Now, the way that we do that is through our first-party deterministic data that we collect in a compliant and transparent manner alongside our owned and operated native ad units. Now, what differentiates us, I'd say, is four things. Firstly is the fact that we have a holistic glass level view of TV viewing behaviors. Now, what I mean by that is, as the manufacturer where the content's being consumed, we can actually see and observe the different types of content that's occurring on our TV devices. So whether that's traditional linear broadcast across all of the broadcasters that TV might be consuming, whether that's streaming services from subscription services, all the way through to ad-funded video on demand, broadcast, and transactional video on demand. We get a good sense of how much time is being spent within those services. But then also things like gaming and social. Let's not forget that the TV isn't just there to watch traditional content, traditional channel or program. The biggest screen in the house is now used in various different ways that we can observe using our first party data. And that brings me on to my second point is the data. In this kind of cookieless world that we're rapidly heading towards, if not already in, and things like iOS 14.5 and transparency tracking, access to first party data is key for brands and advertisers. And again, being the device manufacturer, we're in a privileged position because we have that direct relationship with the consumer, which means that we can get access to first party deterministic data that isn't panel based or modeled. Now, this provides reassurances to advertisers that we can essentially observe the viewing behaviors, provide them with insights, but then also be able to provide targeting and measurement to get that cut through. The third thing, which is really interesting, and I think is huge, but gets really underestimated, is the fact that we own the user interface and the navigation experience, which is ironic, really, that it doesn't get talked about more. But when you think about a digital experience, when you want to find something, first thing that you tend to do, I guess, would be to go onto a search engine of choice and type something in, and it provides you with some content recommendations that what you want do you read or watch. And we've created that navigation experience within our own TVs, and it starts with your remote control. I don't know what kind of TV do you own, Paul? Do you actually have a Samsung by any chance?
Not at the moment. I have a Panasonic, and
oh, okay.
Unfortunately, the discoverability still is pretty poor. I think it's an older generation, but hopefully, as you said, with the updates and operating systems and the new releases of the hardware, that discovery becomes easier for us consumers looking for that AVOD content.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm sorry you don't have a Samsung. Maybe we'll have to try and sort that out. But certainly for those that are watching this video that have a Samsung TV from roughly 2017 onwards, they'll be familiar with the remote control, the smart remote, the one remote we call it. And there's 3 buttons on there that have different video on demand content providers. And the reason why we have that is, for easy access into content. Not only that, search, there's a voice button, on those remote controls as well. Again, it's about ease of access to content. And owning that experience is key for a number of different reasons. So that's the third thing. And then fourth differentiator is, I'd say, transparency and consent. Now, you might say, well, how do you differentiate from that when there's plenty of other publishers and media owners out there that clearly have their own consent frameworks? And I think, certainly within the confines of internet connected TVs, it can be difficult to kind of figure out how you get access to data and get that consent from our users. Certainly here at Samsung, we don't shy away from our responsibilities as one of the world's largest electronics manufacturers to obtain consent in a compliant manner. And I think the best use case of that is the world-class privacy app that we created, privacy app that sits front and center of our Smart Hub. And the reason why we created that app is really to be transparent with our users in how we're collecting and using their data, and trying to make it easy for them. If they want to opt out, then of course they can. But we think it's really important, not just for our consumers, but also for advertisers, brands, and agencies that want to work with us as well. And we're so adamant about the fact that we want to be transparent, that we actually run our own in-house ad campaigns to promote that Privacy Choices app on our TVs. So again, that's when I say that that's a differentiator. I think certainly when I look at the rest of the market, I don't see potentially other publishers doing something similar. Maybe I'm wrong, but certainly in the CTV space, we want to make sure that we're being as completely transparent as possible.
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, as you said, I think you guys are quite forward-facing when it comes to that consent mechanism to operate. There's lots of discussion at the moment, certainly around how CTV manufacturers and those AVOD apps are going to kind of, facilitate that process and that one-to-one communication with their viewers. Okay, great. So we know what you guys do. We know how you kind of differentiate in the market. I guess the next question, and I know most people are saying it's due to stay-at-home lockdowns, but why is there such a quick migration from traditional linear TV to streaming at the moment, in your opinion? And is that causing, I guess, a lot of unnecessary fragmentation for those trying to find those audiences on connected TVs?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the advent of internet connected TVs has really led to a disruption in what we call the new attention economy. TV has always been used as a kind of like mass reach mechanism to reach large audiences with a consistent message. But there's so much choice now available to consumers, and I think that's the key thing here is when you think about a mobile device, the old versions of the mobiles, like a non-smartphone, a dumb phone, if you like. When it made calls and you could send text messages really well. As soon as it was connected to the internet, it opened up a whole world of entertainment options, and it just transformed the way that you use your mobile phone. And that philosophy is something very similar to now what we're seeing with TVs. And that as soon as you connect it to the internet, there's so much choice and new platforms now available that's really causing this kind of like fragmentation of audiences, as you say. Now that makes it fairly difficult for brands and advertisers and agencies, right? Because through this fragmentation, the old school way of reaching a mass audience via broadcast television has been diminished. So then how do you reach that audience in new ways that maybe you haven't considered previously? Not only that, I think I touched on it earlier, but the ways in which that fragmentation has occurred isn't just about a lean back experience when you're watching content on your TV. It's the lean forward as well. And what I mean by that is gaming, and the impact of gaming last year kind of took us by surprise a little bit. Obviously, we can see from our own first party data the impact that gaming has on our TVs. But certainly last year we saw that gaming was up in the UK by around 64% throughout the year, as gamers were spending an hour more playing consoles and games on their Samsung Smart TVs, which is incredible. And again, something else for brands to consider. And then also, I touched on this earlier, but social apps. We've started to see the impact of traditional social media apps on mobile tablet devices now coming to smart TVs. And I think a good example of that is TikTok, actually, who chose Samsung as the first manufacturer to launch their CTV app last year. And certainly, the numbers and viewers seem to be increasing around that area. And that's really interesting, right? Because then you've got a traditional kind of mobile social product now coming to a smart TV. Why is that? Well, because they can clearly see that this is where their audiences are. So when we talk about this new attention economy, there's a different way of looking at how the larger screen in your house is being used, and it's understanding these changes in viewing consumption and being able to adapt to that, certainly from a brand's perspective, to get that cut through and to reach your desired audiences, which ultimately is about minimizing wastage at the end of the day.
Yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense. And you touched upon first party data there, Nick. Now, lots of the I guess excitement around CTV at the moment is the fact that you can apply data sets, but for the very first time on those big premium environments that television offers to advertisers. What types of data and insights can somebody like Samsung Ads offer to agencies when they're considering targeting streaming audiences?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I guess from our perspective, there's two core things that advertisers should be conscious of when they think about using certainly our data. And that's firstly that, we use first-party deterministic data that's, we've got the consent from our users to use. And then the second thing is around, through partnering with Kantar, we know that our Samsung TV owners are nationally representative due to the scale that we have in the market. We also know that 80% of Samsung TV owners use their Samsung TVs as the main TV in the house. And that on average, these tend to be 50 inches or larger. So that's a big screen in which to get your brand message across. Now, in terms of what an advertiser can use this data for, I think first let's look at the sources of data that we use to collect information about viewing behaviors. And that really falls into three buckets. First is we can get access to the TV device level data. And what I mean by that is we can see the size of the screen, the quality of the screen, whether it's 4K, 8K, UHD, whatever, and also the year of the TV. Secondly, we can also observe the devices that are connected to the TV via the HDMI port. So is it a set-top box, a streaming stick, a gaming console, for example? And then thirdly, we have our proprietary ACR data, where we're able to observe device level content consumption. Now, ACR is another one of these acronyms that gets bandied around the industry quite a lot, along with CTV and all the others out there. So for those of you who may not be familiar with ACR or automatic content recognition, this is an identification technology that really captures and identifies content across internet connected TVs or devices in real time. And what this does is it really helps provide advertisers with the ability to target and measure based on their TV viewing habits. So to answer your original question, Paul, really what we're able to observe is that what are the TVs that are viewing linear ads by watching? Are they heavy, medium, and light linear viewers? We can see, using our ACR technology, the types of programs, the channel that they're watching, the video games that they're playing. We can also go down to actors and actresses, even producers of content that's being viewed on the TV at any one time, which is incredible, really, and gets used a lot. But in terms of how advertisers are using this data, there's kind of four key ways, really, and obviously it depends on the type of advertiser or brand that you are and what your objectives are. But the main one that we're seeing at the moment is around linear reach extension. The second is around app uplift. Certainly, if you're a content provider that has an app on our platform, that's going to be key for you to get that cut through. Game uplift, again, if you're a console or a software provider that's trying to get cut through for a certain audience to play your game. Tuning uplift if you're a broadcaster or content owner. And then the fifth one kind of surrounds all four mentioned previously, and that's audience profiles. So really using that first party data to really understand who is playing your game, watching your content, using your app, viewing your linear ads, where do they live, what are their traits, what else are they viewing, can we apply some kind of lookalike modeling at all? It's providing a new kind of data set that certainly advertisers haven't had access to before. And a good example of the use of the data in terms of linear reach extension is the way that we do that is, again, using that ACR technology to identify and observe Samsung TVs in the UK that have been exposed to a linear TV ad. And then we can target those TVs that haven't been exposed to the TV to a specific target audience using our native owned and operated ad units, as well as across our free ad-supported TV service called TV Plus. which is a free kind of AVOD app. It's probably or ad-funded video on demand app, probably the easiest way of thinking about it, which has over 100 channels. And we can use that as a mechanism to reach that kind of heavy streamer, light linear audience that may have missed that brand's ad on linear broadcast television. And then, of course, targeting is one thing, but then it's about measurement, which is, one of the key things that everyone's talking about in the industry at the moment is, okay, so I've got this data, but how can I use it? And through our end of campaign reporting, what we can then provide to brands and agencies is there's almost like a breakdown of looking at our Samsung Smart TVs, what percentage of those TVs saw the linear ad, what was the reach and frequency of that linear ad, and then also, how many of those TVs were exposed via TV Plus and other owned and operated ads that we have access to, so that we can start to have a look at a reach and frequency curve and what that linear reach extension actually looks like. And again, that's all using our first party data.
Okay.
So
that's fantastic. So there's a lot of first party insights that you guys can offer to advertisers if they're looking to find those audiences in streaming environments, right? And from a consent perspective, because lots of brands at the moment and agencies are still trying to figure out what consent looks like on CTV, you guys are pretty well placed to say, look, this is how the mechanisms work at Samsung Ads. We're quite unique when it comes to the two-way conversation that we have with our viewers and collecting of that consent. Okay, so from that perspective then, what about scale? Because it sounds like you've got the right environments, you've got the hardware, you've got that two-way conversation with the viewer to collect consent. How scalable is it at the moment? Because whenever I speak to some of the agencies, say, well, it's not apples for apples, traditional linear television, as you've already said, is still the place to build those brands. But when it comes to scale, how quickly is, the AVOD market growing? What types of numbers can you guys offer to advertisers when they start to think about CTV?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one that we hear a lot actually in market. I think certainly outside of the broadcast environment and certain AVOD apps, then there's a question mark over the scale and how many users are actually viewing AVOD content, and what does the opportunity actually look like. And I think certainly we've seen this trend occurring in the US, and last year we actually broke down the video on demand streaming vertical, if you like. And what was interesting, when we looked at SVOD, subscription services, AVOD, ad-funded video on demand, BVOD, broadcast video on demand, and TVOD, transactional video on demand, we looked at all four of those within the construct of streaming environments to see, what were the trends. And we could see that, certainly subscription services were made up pretty much just over half, 50% of viewing time. But one of the fastest growing areas was actually AVOD. Broadcast video on demand increased as well, but the fastest growing in terms of percentage which surprised us, was AVOD. Now, under that AVOD bracket, we also put YouTube. So it's important to make users aware of that, which is obviously makes up quite a large part of that AVOD percentage. But again, still, it's just interesting for brands to know. So when we look at our own service, TV Plus, I think, the fact that we are the UK's, Europe's, the world's largest TV manufacturer helps, because it gives us that baseline, that scale, if you like, as a solid foundation. But certainly, we can see ourselves in terms of the number of viewers and ad calls, week over week, month over month have increased considerably over the past 12, 18 months. And, working with yourselves from Publica, I'm sure that you've been able to see similar trends from your side with regards to our service and how it kind of stands out from maybe others that you work with. Also, we could see that the TV Plus app, which is pre-installed on all of our TVs from 2016, is front and center. There's no credit card required or email sign up. It's literally, direct access to brand safe content from broadcast that's available immediately on your TVs, which I think is key. And again, it's when I talked earlier about that, owning that user interface and navigation, being able to find content really seamlessly, very quickly, makes a big difference. And we've seen that through organic growth of our own TV Plus service. And also we could see that, numbers wise, it increased 100% in terms of reach over the course of last year. And that's just increasing. And that's down to, certainly the amount of content that's available within the TV Plus service. Like I said, we've got nearly, I think, just over 100 channels now. So we're trying to provide our users with choice and selection of, how they want to be entertained, whether that's, movies or sport, documentaries, comedy, giving them that variety is key. And then also when you take a step back and you look at some of the other data points and insights that are out in the market at the moment, I think the Trade Desk published a report, I think it was towards the end of last year now, maybe early this year, that talked about the increase in AVOD as well. So it's not just ourselves seeing that. I think there's other platforms and ad tech providers out there that are also seeing this. And we've put that down to, a potential amount of subscription fatigue maybe, and certainly throughout lockdown with people maybe tightening their belts with regards to how much they can afford to sign up for subscription services, having access to broadcast quality content for free certainly is going to be appealing for consumers. So that clearly plays a part as well. So I think we're probably going to see more ad-funded video on-demand services as, certainly people realise that there's an opportunity here. And if this is what consumers want and they're looking for, then ultimately, it's up to publishers to provide that to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so from I guess the next 12 to 24 months, I know that's a long time in ad tech, streaming, innovation, M&A, etc. Where do you see, I guess, the European market evolving to? I know it's quite an expansive question, but you see a lot of the trends. Samsung ads. If you was an advertiser today, what would you be thinking about from a CTV plan perspective, and what they should be doing going into the rest of this year and I guess for the next 12 months ahead?
Yeah, that's a great question, Paul. And what I would say is, if you're not already testing and trying CTV in whatever guise that is, there's lots of options out there in the market at the moment, then certainly I would start testing and experimenting now, so that you understand what's possible, with regards to the data that's out there and the different targeting measurement solutions. But if we take a step back, I think that the one thing that won't change is it's important to put consumers first, right? And ultimately the television viewer. And the one thing that won't change is that, consumers are always going to want quality content at their convenience on the best screen of the house. What that content looks like really depends on the individuals within the household, I guess. But when we think about what might change, certainly I've touched on that a second ago, is that there's going to be more platforms and content providers that are going to enter the market, because again, the proliferation of the internet with TV provides you with that access to get your content in front of television households in different ways. I think we'll start to see improved search discoverability and UI, and certainly voice is something, certainly if you're in a Samsung TV, then you'll be familiar with, Google Assistant, Alexa, and our own Bixby service, and, ways in which to access content. I can see that only improving over time. And then, that's because of the fact there is more platforms and content to discover. I think the third thing will probably be, with more connected TVs, more internet-enabled devices provides you with more data. And that's only going to provide advertisers and brands with more data targeting and measurement solutions, which can only be a good thing. And then the final piece I would say is probably around the connection of other devices within the household and how they connect to the TV, the biggest screen in the house. And certainly, here at Samsung, I think we're very fortunate. We're not just a TV manufacturer. We know that we play in lots of different verticals when it comes to electronics. So understanding how other devices play a part in the average day in a consumer and making sense of that is going to be really, really interesting, which obviously plays a part with household IDs and everything else. But I can see that only evolving and getting more interesting as well.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point, actually. I was going to ask, what impact did you guys think that mobile would play in the discoverability of those, different AVOD services? Because obviously there's that split screen environment at home. People talk about the television being, I guess, the authenticator potentially of that household ID in the future, because it's constantly fixed in the family living room. It's on the same IP. You know, your computer, your tablet, your mobile switch in and out of different locations, different IPs. What role do you think mobile is going to play, you know, in CTV moving forward?
Yeah, I think it's going to play a critical role. I think it's almost like an enabler in a way. You know, one thing that we do know is when we think about, you know, internet connected TVs, the one thing that would be great to have and to be able to do is almost like that acquisition, and have some kind of attribution mechanism to be able to see, you know, TV has always been seen as a brand play, you know, to get your message out there to a mass audience. However, you know, using that data, is there a way to connect to be able to prove that, you know, a television household seeing that brand message has then gone on to purchase, you know, said product that's been advertised. And that's certainly something that, you know, excites us when you think about the impact that mobile has for consumers and their relative households. You know, certainly one of the things that we're working on right now here at Samsung Ads is a reach extension product from understanding viewership behaviors on the TV and being able to identify households that have been exposed to a linear TV ad, and then connecting that household on their mobile, tablet and desktop with an ad that either extends whether they have or haven't seen a linear ad, or certainly provides some kind of call to action to sign up, purchase, or try whatever, you know, product's being promoted on the TV. And that won't just be that reach extension product onto connected devices, won't just be Samsung mobiles. That will be across, you know, whatever mobiles within the household. Again, going back to that data and device ID is going to be key there. But also more recently, we've launched TV Plus mobile across EU5, Austria and Switzerland. And what's interesting about that is we've actually launched it with our new consent management platform, which we've partnered with OneTrust. And that the reason why that's important is it enables us to work with all the major DSPs. And what that means is that we can actually target opt-in users now with personalized ads, and pass on some of those personal identifiers to programmatic buyers, which will enable them to use third-party DSPs for targeting and frequency capping. So we're already thinking about, you know, the importance, again, going back to consent and privacy. How can we apply that firstly in the mobile space? How can we apply that with CTV? How can we connect the two devices that we know, you know, complement each other in order to drive brand awareness, enable advertisers to reach their desired audiences, and then ultimately measure the impact at the back end. So those are just two examples of mobile. There are more that we're working on as well, but hopefully that just gives you a bit of a flavour for where we see it evolving.
No, that's really interesting. Thanks for that, Nick. Perfect. So it sounds like you guys got the hardware, you've got the adoption, you've got the scale, you've got the consent, you've got the data, and now it also sounds like you're, you know, leveraging different devices to give you incremental reach into the household. I learned a lot. Thank you very much. I didn't realise that you guys were the first smart TV manufacturers.
Yeah, back in 2008, and the TV, I think it was called the Bordeaux or the Burgundy, one of the two. I can't remember now.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's come a long way since then. So you know, certainly we're trying to constantly think about the consumer and evolve our smart TVs to make it as easy as possible to use and to ultimately delight our customers. So yeah, it's exciting times, Paul.